find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance on a
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. Judy, what's today's episode?
Overcoming Shame, an interview with Malisa Hapner.
We just finished that interview. Delightful.
What a person, like a great person. She has done so much personal work, and really, I was very inspired by her.
Yeah, I was too. And it just really, it's fun to talk to someone who has such, I think I used the word credibility, among other things, in helping folks overcome shame, among other things. A little spoiler alert, one of the things I ask her about, because she talks about it in her materials, she maxed out the adverse childhood experiences questionnaire. For those of you who don't know what that is, look at the interview. She'll explain it. But it's like, she had a really rough childhood.
She did,
and overcame with a lot of work and a lot of heart and a lot of compassion. And it's just really inspiring to talk to her.
Yes, she is.
So check that out. Before we get there, gee whiz, buy our books.
Yeah.
And let us know, follow us and rate us and do all that kind of stuff.
And share us with your friends.
And I want to put in one little special plug in
Yes.
addition to just, buy our books. I'm working on another book now, looking for potential readers of the pre-publication version, which is not quite done yet. It's going to be another few weeks. But looking for folks who will be willing to do that. So if that is you, gee, Judy, how should people get in touch with us?
I think they can go to our website, ctin7.com. That's CT Couples Therapy, IN numeral 7.com.
ctn7.com. Those of you watching the video of this will see it floating above our head. But if you're just listening to it, it is, as you said, ctn7.com. So let's get on with our interview, and we'll see you on the other side.
Our guest today is Malisa Hapner. Malisa is a clinical social worker in Oklahoma, an author, and the host of the podcast Emotionally Unavailable. She overcame an extensive history of childhood trauma and only realized well into adulthood its significant lasting impact. Malisa reached burnout in every area of her life and experienced profound darkness. Deciding to give healing one more chance, she began moving the pieces of her life. She quit her job, started a podcast, and opened a private practice. She is now teaching others how to rid themselves of shame and find unconditional love for themselves and each other. Malisa, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Well, we are delighted to have you, and I was on your podcast and really enjoyed that, and it's great to have you on ours.
I had a great time too.
We always like to start off by asking our guests, how'd you get in the work you do? Tell us something about your own journey into this.
The work I do. Well, I got my master's in 2007, right after I had my second child, in social work. But I mostly did full-time hospice social work I still do a tiny bit of bereavement work for hospice, but that was mainly what I did. But then I felt the spirit move me into education, because I was one of those people who was like, I just wish that, I want to be the type of teacher that I wish my child, who makes it really hard for his teachers, could have. And the first day of school, I was like, no, I see why. I see now. I see. And 2, I am not good at this, but my pride was way too big to say that to anyone. I was like, love it. This is so great. It was not great. It was not great at all. But
I will say I'm a retired, I was a classroom teacher. And yes, it's
bless you.
One of the toughest jobs in the world.
It is, especially when you compare it to the pay. And at this time in Oklahoma, they started first year teachers out at $34,000 a year.
Oh my God.
So I took a very giant pay cut to take that job. And and I knew that going in, but then that first year of teaching was when we did the teacher walkout. I had a really interesting education career. We did the teacher walkout, and then my third year of education was when I decided I'm going to move into a different role of school counselor. Was COVID, and when we all got sent home. So I really only lasted 2.5 years, but 2 years and 3/4. But then I moved into the school counselor role, which was a much better fit. But what I found in education is it draws to the codependent, the people who think that they can save the world. And, God love them for that. But with that comes this self-sacrifice attitude. And I was wildly unpopular for the fact that I had really good work-home life boundaries. And so that was really kind of the beginning of my unraveling, honestly, because I'm also codependent and I only received validation through those external praises. And I wasn't getting that because I kind of sucked as a teacher in terms of educating the children on math and things like that. I was great at, connecting with them and I taught them some very good life stuff, but I was just getting it's a very thankless job. The parents weren't my problem because I approached that role from a parent perspective a lot of times. So, I could relate well to parents, but, and I won't even say it's really an admin fault. It's a system that's really broken from the top down. And so I was really struggling because I needed to be told I was doing a good job and I wasn't being told that.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the beginning. And then I just reached full burnout, still in the role of school counselor. And that's when everything shifted for me.
Yeah, what everything shifted, meaning what? Like how did you experience that, and then how did you figure out how to find your way out of that?
Well, I just reached the pinnacle of depression. And when deciding okay, I'm going to live, I have to do something different. And so I quit my job. I started my podcast. I started healing. I feel so incredibly grateful because the people that I met on my show really were very instrumental in my healing. One of my first guests was somebody who provided information about a book because she works with the guy who wrote it and they use the Finding Peace method. And the Finding Peace workbook was just life altering for me. It was so immediate that I felt really comfortable then really blossoming in a private practice because I approach everything I do from the perspective of the person who needs healing. I don't think it's my education or credentials that make me really good at what I do. It's the fact that I have experienced all of the same things and I really bring myself into those sessions.
Yeah, and people skills are probably more important than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Hmm. I know one of the things you mentioned in the profile information we looked up on you, you maxed out the adverse childhood experiences questionnaire as a
Yeah.
kid. Maybe could you explain to people what that means? Because I mean that's for those of us who know what that is, it's like, wow, that's impressive that you're sitting here talking about it.
Some of us don't know what it is,
And
though.
indeed, so for the
Yeah.
benefit of folks who aren't in the field, could you explain that?
Yeah, well, and what's funny is I hadn't heard of this questionnaire. I still don't know its origin, but where I came across it was in my second year of teaching. The principal had received it, and so for our PD, she was trying to do a trauma informed PD so that we could have more information about how to deal with children who have experienced trauma. Unfortunately, it was just handed to us and with no trigger warning, no nothing. And I'm going through this questionnaire and just feeling sick because it's triggering every single thing because it asks you a series of questions to rank. It's 10 different categories. The highest score on the original form, I think there's been some alterations, but was a 10. And it's have you been physically abused? Have you been sexually abused? Have you had a parent who was incarcerated? Have you had a sibling who was incarcerated? Those are the big ones that I remember. Did I say addiction?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was every single one of them. And I was like, okay, I don't feel good. And why are we not acknowledging the adult trauma in this room? Which was really like the first time I started to say, like, we need the same things these kids need. Like, we need love and we need nurturing too. And I'm not saying that you're like the most equipped to do this, but if you could quit being so negative, that would be so helpful. But it was really instrumental in the first time I'm really understanding what trauma looks like, because I had a base knowledge, very little, of some things from following a lady called the holistic psychologist, but that really was the first time I had heard we've all experienced some level of trauma, and not just veterans and PTSD. Like, that was all I knew about trauma up to that point. And so that was really a shift in the way that I viewed myself too. I didn't know what to do with it really, but it did help me like acknowledge, like, man, you've got some stuff you really need to work on. And also just reinforce the notion that just because I'm a really reactive person doesn't make me mean. Like, there are things I need to work on, but like, this is for a reason. It's not just because I'm a bad person.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's, you're describing an element that I lump under the general category of faith. It's like, okay, so sometimes you're reacting more than, in hindsight, you wish you had, and yet that doesn't make you a bad person. You're a valid person. You got that way for understandable reasons. Even if they weren't understandable, you're still a valid person. You work with that. And that's, I think, what for a lot of folks, that's when things can turn around. And so I'm kind of curious, like, how did you turn that around? So you recognize, wow, I've been through all this stuff, don't quite know what to do about it yet, but somehow you found your way. Like, tell us about
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it was a long, winding road. From that point, I was trying to give myself more compassion. It really wasn't until I did the shame work that I did through that Finding Peace workbook that I
Mm,
could understand that I really was just covered in shame, that all of this noise that had been created in my head, um, the way they view shame is like these different archetypes. And I was able to identify which archetypes were present based off the narratives that I'm feeding myself with them. And just getting all of that out of my head and just
mm,
sitting down and understanding that it all is for a reason. And I just, I mean, how I got to where I am now is compassion. The more I tried to understand that we're all kind of experiencing some level of trauma, and B, we're not really that different as humans. I started to see that we all kind of carry some of the same narratives. Like, I think most of us, until we do the work, feel at our core fundamentally unlovable, and that the weight of the world is on our shoulders to carry with nobody to help us. And I started to understand that a lot of the judgments that I was making on others really reflected a judgment that I had on myself. And so
yeah.
when I just turned the mirror on me and quit thinking about anyone else or what anyone else was doing, and really tried to just fill myself with love and compassion, I started to be able to extend that to myself and others, and see the similarities between all of us instead of the differences. And
Mhm.
so I really think that compassion piece was probably the biggest part, because before I was relying on that little finite amount of self-control and discipline that we wake up with each day, regardless of like how psycho I ever was as a mom, because I was. I kind of did that committed, send them off to school with love thing. So like, no matter what was happening in the morning, I was not going to like react. But then that was it. That was the
Yeah.
only self-control and discipline I had for the entire day.
Be
And
good.
so now
I can
everyone
relate,
else
huh? Yeah.
is getting
That's
all of it.
the fact you're describing that as this finite amount. I've seen research on that. If you've heard
Mhm.
about that, yeah, it is amazing. It's sort of like, yeah, you got a certain amount of self-control, willpower, or whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't take it perfectly literally, but it's as if
Right.
there's sort of a container in there and it
Mhm.
doesn't have that much. And if you use it up in the morning, you kind of blew it for the afternoon. And that
Oh, yeah.
is there's some research on that. That's sort of
Yeah. I
But
mean, I
interesting.
it
have
sounds
about
like all of
2 hours out of 24.
Hmm.
Mhm.
But it sounds like all of your life experiences have given you this resiliency that now you're able to pass on to other people. Yes, am I hearing that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I celebrate the things that I used to be so ashamed of. I have always been a really fiery person. I just had to learn how to hold it instead of extinguish it. So
Mm.
I was super reactive, but I didn't, that self-control discipline piece was kind of the only tool in my toolbox. Like,
Mhm.
no, Melissa, you know better. You know better. And then that only lasts you so long. But once I started to just like build up my toolbox with really good tools, because I'll be really honest, I was motivated by spite for 43 years because in that little trauma unit that I was born into, um, well, first of all, I was raised in kinship foster care. So that comes with a whole list of
Oh,
statistics
wow.
that are given
Yeah.
to you a lot. I didn't like that. I understand why they did it now, and I'm not grateful for it. But at the time, it was like, oh, you don't tell me who I will be. And then I also had like just really messed up family members who said some really horrible stuff because it was a really dysfunctional family unit. And so I just used every single thing that they said to me or who I would be or who I was to them as motivation to not be any of those things. But I found, late in my 30s, okay, I've made all the right decisions, but for all the wrong reasons. And I
Mm.
mean, I'm glad that I was the golden child of my system because I would take my life over the life of my siblings any day. But it wasn't until I became motivated by love that everything shifted for me. And
Mhm.
it was at that time that I really was able to stop victimizing myself. We talked about that when you were on my show, is that like, well, I'm on my second marriage. And so um it got to like we've been married since 2012. Probably by 2014, I was like, I just don't know. Maybe I'm just not supposed to be married. I just think I'm maybe just not
Mhm.
good at this or what, because I keep picking these guys who A, B, C, D, E, instead of like looking at myself to be like, what are we doing? But I, like so many of us, just felt like I loved everyone else way more than they loved me. Like, or I
Mm.
was on the periphery of all of my relationships, or um, I don't have a person. It was just themes like that always. But I mean, then I realized, okay, yeah, I kept a really fair amount of separation between me and everyone else so that I didn't have to be vulnerable. But that's still a little bit of a practice in learning how to like in real time communicate how I'm feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, I was going to ask, how that work you've done has impacted your relationship because it
Yeah,
sounds like it has.
oh, it everything, because before my focus really was on every last thing that he wasn't doing for me, how he wasn't meeting my needs. And then I had to understand that there's a really big difference between expectations and needs, and that expectations kind of were the center of all of the discourse because in my world, I'm just loving in the way I want to be loved. And then every time I do that, we're creating a contract that you don't know about, but you have signed it in your blood, and I've signed it in my blood, and you're going to meet these expectations. And when I started to understand, like, yeah, that's your betrayal wound. And that is why you are constantly feeling betrayed by this man, because it was really bizarre stuff. Like, he accepts a phone call from a family member. I'm betrayed. Do we know why? No. But it was like nonstop all the time. I'm feeling betrayed. And I think that was the big shift when I understood the difference between I'm feeling betrayed and you betrayed me. That
Mhm.
was when everything really changed. And understanding that I have to communicate better because all of this
Mhm.
was just in my head all the time. And I wasn't always aware of that. I would just go pick a fight and do the comfortable thing
Mhm.
versus acknowledging what was here. Like, it's okay that I feel betrayed all the time still. I mean, that comes up still. It comes up and I just get curious about it, but it's there. I have
Ah,
CPTSD, but I'm
yeah.
curious about it. So I'm like, oh, what, wonder where that came from. That's weird. I haven't experienced that in a little bit, but I'm not assigning blame, not to
Well,
me, not
in
to
that,
him.
what you just described, I mean, from my experience, before I did a lot of couples work, or even as I was doing couples work, I also worked with a lot of folks with PTSD and CPTSD. And what you just described sounds to me like what it's like when you process some trauma. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, you still feel it, but you remember it. In other words, the memory is triggered, but you're not in freak out mode.
Right.
So you're able to be curious. You're able to say, "Oh,
Yes.
what's that about?" When you're there, basically you're fine. That's 99% of the work right then. Now figure it out. You have your brain available to figure it out with because you haven't clicked into panic mode.
Right.
So to do that, you had to do a lot of processing, I guess would be the term out of EMDR, where they're saying
Mhm.
you have to
Right.
sort of
Right.
expose yourself to the thoughts without freaking out enough so that your brain learns it's safe to go there.
Mm-hmm.
It's safe to be reminded of that stuff without you don't have to respond with panic. It's just, oh, geez, I remember that. Yeah, that really sucked. That's that feeling
Exactly.
of I'm being betrayed. Well, I'm not really being betrayed, but I can see why I feel that way.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly. And I think before I was triggered by everything from everyone. I mean, I
Mhm.
lived in survival mode from the time I woke up until the time I went to sleep. So going through the process of quitting my job and working from home really kind of allowed myself to just close the bubble. Like I really became insulated into my home because I needed quiet for a while to really calm and finally unravel all of these things that I had ignored for, 44 years. And it wasn't until then and having such a difference in the relationship with him, and it really helped because he listened to my show. He listens to every episode, and that was
Mhm.
like a great act of love on his part. But he
Wow.
hears me and he knows I'm not. It's not personal because he has his own stuff, and
Don't
everything
we
I
all?
say was a trigger to
Yeah.
him because it would trigger his shame, like I'm not meeting your needs, I'm not da da da. And then I'm with my, very limited amount of understanding. I had a lot of knowledge, but not a lot of understanding. So I'd be like, no, that is not how you have a conversation. We don't flip the conversation to your needs when I'm discussing my boundaries and blah, blah, blah. No compassion, no
Mhm.
Mhm.
understanding. And so when he was able to hear me from a very neutral place, he softened too. He's a pretty soft guy anyway with me, but he didn't have his defenses up. There's no
Yeah.
barriers there now to him hearing me, and he doesn't have to take it personally because he knows it's not personal. And
Mhm.
so that was a really big shift for us, was him being able to just not react to anything I react to. As we've progressed, or I've progressed and continue to grow and evolve in this, now I've kind of started to let the outside world in again and work on being, not so reactive to everyone. And it finally occurred to me one day, like, oh, okay, I can see where I've been expecting everyone else to cater to this line, where I would always be like, why would they say that? Don't say that to me. You can't say that to me. Or, like even someone posting, like hunters, I don't like when they post that stuff, like, death on Facebook. It really, really hurts me, but it's my responsibility to calm myself. It's not their responsibility to not make the post. It's not my husband's responsibility to not say the thing. It's not my kid's responsibility to not give me attitude. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm
Mhm.
responsible for my responses. And
Mhm.
when I got to that place of understanding, another huge shift, like, oh, I'm embarrassed because I didn't even know this was the expectation. I really thought it was okay to be like, don't talk about that in front of me. Mm-mm. And
Mhm.
obviously, that's a very broad general statement. Like, yes, it's okay to set boundaries. Like, we don't talk politics at Thanksgiving, things like that. But
Uh,
like, I had a lot. My boundaries were a little force field around
mhm.
me and everyone else.
It's just, as you're describing it, I often note this. For you to be able even to consider, wait a minute, this is something that I'm doing that I might have some room to have some compassion for myself, that's a leap of faith right there.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to say, maybe this whole living business is actually doable. Maybe I am
Right.
lovable. lovable. You know, that's to me,
Right.
that's the same thing. Maybe I actually am lovable. Maybe I'm a really a valid person, always have been, and these reactions are coming from somewhere that maybe I can do something about. You know, that takes an act of self-forgiveness, I think, right? To be able to
Yeah.
get to that place.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was a really important process was anytime, especially now, I think anytime I am reactive, because I'm not perfect, like all of this understanding didn't change the fact that I'm still going to be reactive sometimes, or I'm tired and hungry, and then like my kid, she's 11 and didn't brush her hair well, so she had some really horrible tangles we had to work through. I wasn't nice, I'm not gonna lie and say I was nice, but I have to be able to forgive myself in those moments and understand, like, no one ever said you weren't going to be human. And so
I was
that's a
just going to say,
process.
let me check the notes. Yes, I believe you're human. Is that correct? That's yeah,
Exactly. And I used to say things like that and thought I knew what I meant by it, but I mean it in a totally different way now, because I think I used to try to um I'll say accept what I perceived as failures or flaws. Like, okay, I mean, I guess, like that's okay. And talk myself into believing that it was okay to be imperfect. Whereas now I really view anything, and I'll use the word again, perceived failures or flaws, as tools to
Mhm.
understand myself and humanity better. I don't believe that anything really is a coincidence. So if I'm having a particular mood that day, I don't always go introspective about it, because like during PMS, nothing makes sense. I'm not going to try to make sense out of that. Like if I'm overthinking that day, I'm going to be like, oh, I don't know why we're doing this and I don't care, because it's not going to serve me to try to understand that. But it does serve me to say, why did I react that way? I wonder, because that's not normal for me. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know why I did that. But yeah, lots of
yeah, yeah.
forgiveness, lots of compassion. But when you're able to give that to yourself, then you're able to give it to everyone.
Exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
It's a very short step, isn't it? It's like,
Hmm.
oh, you just reacted in a way I didn't like. Well, I know what that feels like. Been there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The phrase, oh, I do that too, all the
Hmm.
time. All the time. And I actually learned that in real time on my show one day. I used to have a series with a friend of mine, because like in the early days when it's hard to get guests, maybe y'all never went through that, but
Oh, we did.
okay. Well, every Friday we did this series of like me and my friend talking about whatever. And she came with a complaint about her partner, and we were getting into that. And I was like, "Oh yeah, when they this and they that." And then I was like, "Oh, I actually do that too." I like, and you can feel the energy soften
Hmm.
in the conversation, and it shifted so many things because I understood. And yeah, I mean, it sucks that we can't like always be nice, even when we don't understand why they're doing something, but it
Mhm.
is so much easier to be loving and compassionate when you get, oh, you do that too, honey. And
Uh-huh.
I do that a lot with my clients, is show them like, I hear you and that's valid, but I'm gonna go ahead and show you how you do that too, because
Hmm.
they know that when they come to me, they're gonna get absolute truth all the time.
Hmm. Well, and that's, that is something one gets, that's a privilege that you are granted by people working with you. I certainly
Hmm.
experienced that in ways, and I try to be very cognizant of that privilege. It's like, I don't, I rarely will give advice per se.
Uh-huh.
And if I do, I wrap it up in saying, look, I am not an expert on living your life. Here's some thoughts, try it on. Because the privilege I'm being granted is to be honest with folks, and they are honest with me in dealing with some really hard stuff. But I don't pretend that I'm any better than they are at sorting it out. I'm just going to ask
Right.
good questions, I hope. I'm going to
Right.
invite them into asking good
And
questions.
hopefully they'll discover it on their own.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, with my help.
With your,
I'm
yes, with,
yeah,
yes,
exactly.
the way that you phrase your
Yeah,
questions,
yeah.
that enables them to turn around and see, just like what Melissa was saying, that
Hmm.
clicked in her brain.
Yeah. Yeah, because imagine in fights that people have with each other, they will often say that, well, you do that too. And that
Yep.
usually doesn't go well, when people are
Well,
in defensive
the
mode.
word hypocrite is used by everybody. You're a
Yeah,
hypocrite because blah blah blah. And I'm
yeah.
like, oh. We're all hypocrites, guys. Let's
We
just lay that
are.
word down, please. We are all hypocrites
I
because
have
we
said
can
that
only
very
see
thing.
from our own face. That's it.
Well, one of our kids, my second son, Seth, years ago wrote a piece. He's a wonderful writer. He wrote a piece in defense of hypocrisy, which I thought was really kind of cool. And it's a very similar thing. It's
Yeah.
like, so to say you should never be a hypocrite is to say you should never aspire to being better than you actually are. Because
Hmm.
in aspiring to be better than I actually am, it means, well, yeah, I'm a hypocrite. I'm saying I should do things that I don't always do, or you should do
Right.
things that I don't always do. Okay, fair enough. That's the human condition. I
Yep.
need to be not a jerk about it, ideally. That's where the hypocrisy thing could come up, as
Right.
opposed to saying, well, yeah, I would hold you to a higher standard than that. Of course, I fail too. So I'm not going to get all mad at you about it, but I'm recognizing, yeah, we should do better. Let's all try to do better here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. So you mentioned shame, and I wonder if you could address that a little bit, because that's certainly something I know you've talked a lot about. That because sometimes, a lot of times when folks in the field, as we are talk about it, people will differentiate between guilt and shame, but I'm not sure everybody does that sort of in common parlance. What do you mean by shame, and how do you help people with it?
Well, I believe shame carries a narrative that who I am at my core is bad. Not that
Yeah.
I did a bad thing, but like I was born into bad. And
Yes.
um for me, because of being the golden child, the whole good girl syndrome carries a lot of shame around imperfection. And
Mm,
so a lot of my reactivity, especially with my kids, came because they would do something and then immediately I'm like, I failed as a parent. And
mhm.
it took a long time to really unravel and be able to hear myself saying that. But, I would go into the bathroom. This is a very real thing. It happens all the time. I go into the hall bath where my children use the bathroom and there's towels. Like, God knows we cannot go put a towel in dirty clothes. They're just all over the floor, right? Used to immediately, I'd be like, oh, they never pick up after themselves, blah, blah, blah. Now, meanwhile, I'm not ever asking them to. I'm just yelling about how nobody in this house helps me ever. And it's always all on me. And what I realized is like the shame was that I couldn't do it all by myself, that I couldn't be the superhero
Yeah.
that a lot of
Mhm.
moms are, or wives or women in general are taught that we have to, we in the house, you're responsible for all of these things and you should be able to do every last ounce. And I mean, I held myself to a standard of like, your house needs to be like show ready, like you're selling it 24/7, which,
Mm.
God love the people who are able to do that. Won't ever be me, has never been me, but that was like, the source of the problem.
Not us
But
either.
I don't know how
yeah,
people do
I,
it.
well, OCD. I mean, literally, without some like real reason to do it,
Mhm.
they don't. I don't know most average people like that keep their house ready for a realtor to walk in 24/7. But that's kind of the way I view shame. And I approach shame from all these subconscious narratives and the fact that all of this program that we received in childhood and then just greater society at large, especially like my generation and older, no one ever sat with us to say, what's going on? Like, how can I help you with this emotion? We were all told to rub some dirt on it, walk it off.
Back
Don't
it up.
cry, or I'll give you something to cry about,
Mm.
all of these things. So, what do? You use your little kid filter to understand the world around you. And ultimately, it's all your fault. Everything bad that happens in the world is somehow your fault. And so, just taking those on over and over and over and realizing that you've put all of this pressure on yourself to be able to perform at an astronomical unachievable level. Well, if you're holding yourself to a cross of perfection, of course there's shame because you're never going to meet that standard ever, ever,
Mhm.
ever. And I think
Yeah.
really it really does boil down to a lack of connection with yourself. I was walking around as a floating head, overthinking, over intellectualizing my experiences, minimalizing, trivializing the way that I was taught, and my experience didn't matter. And so I believe that's kind of where shame is born, is when you are taught to turn off to your intuition, to when you have autonomy stripped of you by maybe well-meaning people. Even examples like, you must hug this relative because otherwise you're rude. I mean,
Yeah.
for a person who had the childhood that I had, really anyone, I will say, but for me especially, it was particularly hurtful to be put into situations where I didn't have bodily autonomy just because I was supposed to make other people comfortable. I've already experienced atrocious physical and sexual abuse. I should get as much bodily autonomy as I want. I believe that we all should. Let me just clarify. But that was one of the places that my shame was born, because I don't want to say hello. I don't want to hug. I want to be in charge of when I do those things. And yet I'm being forced and taught your comfort doesn't matter. But the fact that I want it to matter, shame. Like there's just different levels and layers of that. And I think that's why I was particularly drawn to the Finding Peace workbook and the archetypes and understanding kind of which one pops up when. And I was really good at using that one that made it all everybody else's fault all the time. Well, I wouldn't have done that if they hadn't done this. That was my big one. And so it all just boiled back down to the fact that I couldn't be perfect and I didn't know how to live with that. And I feel like as women especially, that's kind of the cross we bear until we lay it down.
So how do you help folks? And like tell us about your practice. Like, do you work with individuals, couples, mostly women, men and women? Tell us about that.
Mostly individuals, mostly women. I have had a few men. I have one male currently. I think because of my own like preconceptions about men in general and just working through that, I haven't been super open to men coming in. I kind of just go off intuition, like honestly, because I'm not a male, and I do believe our brains function differently. So, not that I can't be beneficial for men, but I feel like I'm probably better suited for women. So we kind of, the great thing is all of my clients leave our first session hopeful and with a little bit of direction, where they understand you're not crazy. Like none of this happened for no reason. This is all from a root cause that we're going to get to, and you are going to be okay because you want to be okay, right? So we're going to get there. And mostly, like the first thing we do is get to the understanding of how their wounding was created, them learning to identify the different archetypes of shame. And then we work on that self-love and compassion piece. And they kind of, because I'm so forward about the way I do things, and like I teach them to look at themselves and others as a mirror, and that you would not feel this way about a situation if it didn't reflect something in you back at you. So you're projecting, they're reflecting, and we have to figure out, why did your brain think that is what they meant, or why did you perceive the situation this way? But again, so much compassion. Like, it's okay that you do that, but why? And also, I'm a tenet of social work is to meet people where they are. So, I will say whatever, and then they may be very reactive. I'm like, hey, that's fine. Like, you're not ready to say that. That's okay. I don't care. Like, I'm not judging you. That was just an opinion or something I'm offering or whatever. And so I think we really developed this trust early on, and so a lot of the shame work, and then just progressing into like, stop minimalizing your experiences, stop trivializing your experiences, because I don't actually get a lot of people. If I were to like measure who my clients are, there's two categories: the people like me with all this complex trauma, and then the people who would say, I had a really normal childhood, so I just don't know why this is what I'm experiencing. And I'm like, well, let's break down what normal looks like. Because if you're my age or older, normal's not great. Like what we got wasn't great. Like, let's be real. And just teaching people like how, hey, you can hold two perspectives, which was you had great parents, and you can acknowledge that they did the best they could with the information they had at the time, but they didn't meet your needs as a human. And that's okay. Like, they can't meet all of your needs.
You're
And
touching
you
on
have to come here now.
You've touched on several of my favorite themes, absolutely favorite themes. One of them is I always tell couples when I see them, it's almost always right around 20 minutes in the first session because of the stuff that I've done up till then. I point out, said, well, now that we're old buddies and I've known you for, 20 minutes, I can tell neither one of you is batshit crazy. And and they will usually smile and, but that actually turns out people have told me I mean, they already do that, I hope, but that's still really important just to know, oh, I'm not
Yeah,
crazy.
somebody's validating.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's not
Yes.
that I'm built wrong or something, you know?
Mm.
And look, that's not a totally empty statement either, because every once in a great while, in 30 years of private practice, fewer than a handful of people, I haven't said that because they are. Do you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
well, is
No,
psychotic
I
or
mean,
having a
there are
manic
people
episode or
with
something like
real,
that.
yes,
I mean
yeah.
that it's rare in an outpatient practice, but it does happen. So it's not like that's a totally vacuous statement. It's like, well, no, you might have been crazy, but it turns out you're not. So that's good to
Right.
know. Again, the folks seeing me aren't generally not surprised by that assessment, but they're reassured by it. So there's that piece, and then that notion of just the idea of you're doing the best you can. Your parents did the best you can.
Yep.
That's the essence of forgiveness, is to
Hmm.
recognize, oh, you're a valid person doing the best you can. You still kind of screwed up, but nevertheless, you're a valid person doing the best you can. I am too, and I can extend that to you. That's what lets people heal. So that
Yes.
I think fundamentally that's what lets people heal. And again,
Yeah,
I
I
pull
agree.
that together in the word faith. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because faith to me really boils down to the fact that it all matters. There is a
Mhm.
purpose, and
Yes.
you have a purpose, and your passions aren't a coincidence, and the relationships that we choose aren't a coincidence. And so I think understanding the ability to forgive yourself really is a tenet of the fact that you wouldn't have been designed the way you are if it didn't matter. And yeah, I do think it's really important that, because some people come into therapy really broken and
Hmm.
feeling like this is my last ditch effort, and I'm like, hey, you, I promise you, I've seen a lot worse. So
Hmm.
you're doing great. And I know how much words like that have meant to me in my
Yeah.
lifetime,
I was going to
and
say you have
uh,
credibility with that.
yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So
Hmm.
I mean, and that's the thing, is I don't change anything about myself in session. They get exactly who I am.
Hmm.
But that is why I stayed away from being a therapist for so long. I didn't know who I was, but I knew I didn't want to like play act. And I felt like that's what I had done
Yeah.
during any like learning, like, practicums and internships and whatever, was like, I'm following a script.
Yeah.
And I was
Right.
fine at that. People
But it
were
wasn't your
impacted.
heart.
It
You
wasn't.
didn't, it wasn't in your soul. You couldn't
Yeah.
transmit what you can now transmit.
And that's
Exactly.
true, I think, of anybody in training.
Hmm.
That's always part of the deal. I remember actually Michael White talking about that. He was the guy from narrative therapy, died a number of years ago. But I remember him in a training that he was giving, he was saying, look, initially, I mean, I'm paraphrasing wildly here. Initially, you're going to imitate what I do because you're learning it. Fair enough, but then it's going to become yours, and it won't look like what I do. It'll look like what you do, and that's fine. That's and as many other people have pointed out, authenticity is way more important than whatever your favorite techniques are.
Right.
Right.
Authenticity is it's really that sense of relationship. Such research as there is, not that I have to appeal to the research because I think it's sort of common sense too, but all the research about the effectiveness, people will say therapy is effective to the extent that they feel that sense of actual relationship with their therapist,
Hmm.
actual alliance, the sense that it's a real person who really cares about you, who's
Mhm.
doing what they can, as opposed to, doesn't seem to matter what school of training we went through, what our favorite techniques are. It's much more about showing up and actually being authentic.
And you were saying
Right.
people leave your office, you guarantee they will leave with a sense of hope, and they get that because you're the embodiment of that.
Hmm.
So you're able to
Absolutely.
transmit it, and it's not a phony thing. It's not, I'm reading the list of whatever my training was. It's coming from you.
Right.
Yeah.
And It's such a symbiotic relationship for me because I get just as much from the energetic exchange as they
Yep.
do. And I think they feel that too. Like I'm
Yes.
genuinely happy when things are going well for them. And
Yeah.
I mean, I have sat and wept openly when hearing about somebody's trauma, and I don't care that I did that.
Yeah.
And a former version of me would have felt like I had to present a certain way when somebody
Yep.
told me something. And I felt like I held steady and strong, but like that hurt me to hear this, you know? And so
Mhm.
I think that that really makes a difference too, is just that I'm who I am. But you know, before healing, I didn't know who I was. I thought I did. I thought I, knew a lot of things about myself, and maybe some of those things were true, but the amount of things I was hiding from everyone around me, including myself, I mean, I couldn't be authentic, but I was a people pleaser. I was not going to say things that ruffled other people's feathers. I just wasn't. I still struggle to do that, but I do now. But like to state my own opinion about something, I will do that now, but I will still fear the consequences of it for a little bit and have to create the safety to do that.
Mhm. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you or learn more about what you do?
Well, I'm super active on Instagram at Melissa.Hepner. My name is spelled different, Malisa. And I have a website, empoweredwithmelissahepner.org. Through my link tree on Instagram, I've actually just created a few new workbooks that are like instant downloads, really cheap. One is called Safe to Be Seen, and it's really about learning to see yourself, but then allowing others to see your true self too. A lot of like mind, body, but connecting and creating safety within your body. And then I have one that is for stopping overthinking. And so there's links on the link tree that'll get you to anywhere you want to be with me.
Well, that's great. We'll make sure to put those in the notes for this episode. And thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you guys.
Well, thank you.
I had so much fun.
We did too.
Good.
Welcome back. I hope you found that interview as inspiring as we did.
Indeed, I agree with that. And so, let us know if you have any sort of topics you'd like us to cover. And all the other stuff we've always talked about. Buy our books. And mention your book signing.
Oh, right. If you happen to be in Vermont, South Burlington, Vermont, on September 14th, 2025, you should come to Barnes & Noble, where Laria Zilber, as many of you know, my alter ego, will be signing copies of her wonderful book, The Blue Tent Erotic Tales from the Bible. So
do come to that and say hi to Laria. You're not going to be able to make that one. Laria's going to be there, but you're not going to be able to make that. I keep trying to get the two of them together, as I've often pointed out, and haven't been able to pull it off quite yet. We still have talked about the possibility of doing an interview with Laria, where you will also be there participating. Yeah, it's really hard to arrange your schedules to get you in the same room at the same time. I know. We'll try. We'll work on it. We'll work on that. Yes, indeed. And so until next time, remember, be kind, don't panic, and have faith.